All right, welcome everyone. We now have a quorum. Welcome to the Sandag Shoreline Working Group meeting. We have a packed agenda today with all kinds of interesting stuff. We're going to learn about citizen science. We're going to hear from Scripps folks on sediment management, surf monitoring, and a variety of things. So we're glad you're all here. This is a wonderful group to be part of, and it has a long history that you'll hear a little bit about later from Keith Greer. But right now, let's get going. And so let's just quickly go around the table and let me ask the Shoreline Working Group board members to briefly introduce themselves since there are some new faces here. And I'll start off. I'm Dwight Worden. I'm a city council member from the city of Del Mar. I have been the vice chair under Serge Dedina, and I'm chairing the meeting today as the acting chair. Joe?
Joe LaCava, representing the city of San Diego, more specifically District 1, which is the northwest corner of our city, and it extends from Torrey Pine State Beach south to Pacific Beach. So most of our coastal beaches are under my purview. My counterpart in District 2 is the alternate here. And I think I've been here 3 years. This is the third year, but very excited to be part of this working group. Thank you, Dwight.
Just in time, you can sit down and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Paloma Aguirre, mayor for the city of Imperial Beach. And is that all we're saying? Happy to be here. Sorry, I'm late.
Yes. Thank you, Paloma. Mr. Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jose Rodriguez, council member from the city of National City. Lovely to be here.
Great. Ron?
I'm Reinhard Flick. I'm a coastal oceanographer at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And I've only been sitting at this table since 1984 when I was the representative from the Department of Boating and Waterways.
All right. Thank you. Next.
Mitch Silverstein, San Diego County Policy Coordinator for the Surfrider Foundation. And I'm much newer than Reinhard. I've been sitting at this table probably for about a year.
You were probably in diapers in 84.
Just
how about
diapers?
Over here?
Hi, Jessica Curran. I am here representing the Navy. I'm a marine biologist and I'm relatively new to the working group as well.
Thank you. Mike?
Yes, sir. Hi, Mike Donovan, council member from the city of Coronado. I was the alternate for Mr. Sankey, who termed out, so I'm fleeted up to the primary.
Dave?
Dave Zito, Deputy Mayor, Solana Beach. I'm here substituting for Christy Becker, who is the primary.
Thank you. Kelly?
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Hinsey. I'm representing the city of Encinitas, and I've had the honor to serve on this board for 3 years. I was not born yet when Reinhardt joined, and this is my first time in the Sandag offices.
Thank you, Kelly. Courtney?
And then for the newer members, my name is Courtney Pesh, and I'm here from Sandag.
Okay. And is Keith in the room? Well, he should introduce himself. He's here. Keith, you want to say hi? All right, thank you. Now that we all know each other, the next item on our agenda is public comments and communications, and we are doing a hybrid meeting, is my understanding. So if anybody in the room wants to make a comment on an item that is not on the agenda, now is your chance. If you want to comment on something that is on the agenda, we'll call on you when that agenda item comes up. So if anybody in the room wants to make a comment, raise your hand, stand up, scratch your head. I'm not seeing anybody. Tessa, is she in the room? Yeah. Do we have any public on the line that wanted to comment at this point?
I do. I'd first like to state that Mayor McCann from the city of Chula Vista is also present at today's meeting.
All right, thank you.
And I do have 2 virtual public comments for item 1, the minutes.
All right, can we hold those for a minute? I see we do have a speaker in the room that stepped up.
I believe he is for item 2, non-agenda public comments.
Yes. All right, sir, if you would like to make a comment, go ahead.
Thank you. Can I get, I have a short video, about a minute. Could I get attached to the screen share? I'm online. My name is Dr. Timothy Bylash. I'm up in, it's actually city of San Diego, but it's Del Mar address. So I thank the people here. I'm not familiar with most of you. You're not familiar with me. I try to pay some attention to the climate. I've lived a lot of places in the United States, and I walk over in the San Diego Lagoon, but this is something that is, I think, epidemic to the whole coastal region. if I could share, let's see. I should have been promoted, and then do I share screen here? And then, thank you. And so you can see that this is the 19th I took this. Let's see if I can start the video. Hello? Video will not start. Why is that? 1 second. There it goes. Okay, so this is a 1-minute video along the south shore of the San Diego Lagoon, just south of the, I might stop it here for a second when we get to some places, but just south of the racetrack. And this is on the 19th of this month. I walk there frequently, and this damage is within the last month after the storms. There's 3 to 10 feet of the shoreline missing.
I'm sorry, Dr. Bilash, are you seeing the video? Because we're not.
Okay.
And while we're waiting, I would just like to clarify for the members of the public that are on Zoom and here in the room that we are taking public comments on item 2 first, which is non-agenda public comments.
Thank you, Tessa. Okay, now we see it, Dr. Bilash. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. So I'm not going to stop it. It's just, but there are 3 to 10 feet of this shoreline that have just dropped into the lagoon in the past month after the last storms. And this is all new. And there were roots, there were other things. And I've tried, and I want to just highlight the seriousness of the shoreline deterioration. And since this is a shoreline meeting, I'm sure you're well aware of it, but I understand Del Mar is planning to have some seawalls put up here. But to me, that's not the issue. The issue is there's so much water in the soil that it liquefies. And it's like quicksand over there on Jimmy Durante. They're rehabbing one of the housing areas on the east side. So I just want to bring it to the attention. San Diego is one of the few organizations that's paying some attention to this. So I thank everybody for their interest. And that's really all I have to say today. And I look forward to listening to the presentations.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bilash. And as the Del Mar representative, I would encourage you, contact me offline outside the meeting. I'd be happy to talk to you about this further. Anybody else in the room that wanted to make a public comment on a non-agenda item? I'm not seeing any. So Tessa, we've got some online, right?
Thank you. I do have 2 members of the public on Zoom that would like to speak. Blair Beekman, please go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks for the meeting today. Thanks for this meeting body. It seems a really interesting group for a fairly large government agency to have such an interesting meeting group. Thank you. I wanted to comment on non-agenda public comment time. I don't know how much time I have. Is there a timer somewhere? Do I have 2 minutes to speak?
There is. You got about 2 minutes and 30 seconds left.
Okay, great. So what I wanted to speak about was I wanted to note that with all the recent storms recently, not just in San Diego, but throughout California, the city of San Diego almost immediately started receiving federal funding. There has been kind of a nature state of emergency declared by the federal agencies for the month of January, basically. And San Diego immediately started receiving really good funding for the future of stormwater and sewer runoff issues that with climate change is, I think, going to become a really important factor in how we consider sea level rise issues. And what the previous person mentioned is that, sea level rise just under our land areas is growing. I'm initially from the San Francisco Bay Area in San Jose, and the area around the bay is significantly going under more and more underwater, and just groundwater is just rising up in local neighborhoods more and more. So I just wanted to thank yourselves for being on the ball to quickly start receiving this federal sewer and stormwater money to be working on. San Jose, interestingly, has received the same money and is basically working in the same sort of way, the same sort of organized way that San Diego is. I work with Oakland, and Oakland is not, I don't think. There's a problem in Oakland where they have the same issues, and for yourselves to be aware of that, I hope that it can be of help in some way to describe that, all cities need federal funding with these climate change issues. I just wanted to make light of that. Thank you and good luck in that continued good work. I've been visiting Hawaii and Maui lately, and the resort area of Kaanapali, their beach is totally washed away. This major, tourist industry, the beach is washed away. They're trying to redevelop the sand and to put in new sand, but it's causing problems down current, to all the tidal pools and reefs. It's making them really sandy now. So really good luck on how you're going to have to deal with soil restoration issues, and hopefully you can learn good lessons from the Kaanapali area in Maui. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, and please stick around. You'll probably enjoy the rest of the presentations. And Tessa, we have somebody else on the line?
Our next and last speaker is Kyle Frolander. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Pretty good on the name there. I appreciate that. A lot of familiar folks in the room. So I don't want to introduce myself too much, but District Director for Congressman Mike Levin, Kyle Frolander. Appreciate all the work that everybody in this room does to protect our shoreline. Just wanted to mention the Congressman's recent work to secure $30.5 million for the Encinitas Solana Beach Coastal Storm Damage Reduction Project as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law to help put sand back on the beaches within the Oceanside Littoral Cell, as well as $1.8 million for the Oceanside Special Shoreline Study, the city of Oceanside doing all its work, and further up the coast, but still again inside the Oceanside Littoral Cell, $9.3 million for the San Clemente Shoreline Protection Project. And just to say that the Congressman will keep working to support those projects as well as any others. The city of Del Mar's Climate Resiliency and Access Improvement Project, which the city will be getting $750,000 from the federal government for at the Congressman's request. And we stand by to support SANDAG's efforts for any future sand replenishment projects and shoreline protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyle. The Congressman's been a tireless friend and supporter of our work, and it's greatly appreciated. Is that it, Tessa? Nobody else?
Thank you, Chair. That concludes public commenters.
All right, thank you. Now, the next item on the agenda is a chance for any board members to make a brief comment if you would like to do so. And I know Councilmember Hinsey has something for us, I think. No? Okay, like I said, anybody else? Yeah, I thought we were going to hear an update about the Cardiff project. No? Okay, anybody else want to give an update, something in your city or your agency that's going on that you would like to share right now? Paloma?
Thank you, Chair. Just want to flag for everyone, if they haven't had an opportunity to read today's San Diego Union Tribune article about Dr. Kim Prather's study on aerosolized transmittability of pathogens and viruses related to the coastal pollution related to the Tijuana River. It's pretty interesting and it's quite terrifying. So if you have a chance to read that, please do so. Thank you.
Yes, it's very sobering. Anybody else? All right, then let's move along. And the next item was we're going to call on Keith Greer. And I think Keith's going to give us a brief history of the working group for those who are new and also some other things we need to know. So Keith.
Thank you and welcome everybody. I'm glad to see you're all here. Again, my name is Keith Greer. I'm the environmental planning manager here at SANDAG. And one of the areas of my oversight is shoreline preservation. So thank you for your work on this group. As Dr. Flick said, this is the oldest working group at SANDAG. I like to say that. They've been meeting continuously since the 1980s. So Reinhardt, you were here from 1984. It's amazing to me. You have 13 voting members made up of the coastal jurisdictions and the bayfront jurisdictions. You also have members from the port and the Navy and the County of San Diego. Those are your voting members. You're supported by both technical and community members here. For example, surf riders and scripts are some of your community members. Other state and federal entities such as like Coastal Commission and the state parks make up your non-voting members. You meet quarterly, and what we like to do is we like to have at least one of those meetings off-site so you actually can see what we're talking about in terms of coastal jurisdictions and coastal issues. Last, I think it was December, we went up to Solana Beach and saw the Solana Beach Encinitas project. It was really kind of eye-opening seeing that area up there. Your charter was updated last year by the Sandag Board. And fundamentally, you look at shoreline management issues, whether we're talking about erosion, like Dr. Tim Byler for showing you some erosion in San Diego, or they're talking about sea level rise adaptation measures, such as oyster reefs or other sand dune projects, or things like monitoring, regional monitoring. You promote best practices amongst yourselves and amongst the region. We get to hear some stuff like the oceanside projects that are coming online, some of the projects that we saw down in Imperial Beach for adaptation measures. And you look at state of the science. What's the science say about coastal resources? Today, you'll hear about some of the sand migration in the oceanside littoral cell. You also support regional projects. So the one I'm going to talk about shortly is about the Beach Nourishment Project, what we call Regional Beach Sand Project 1 and 2, and regional monitoring. Last meeting, as we had this group, we talked about what's the size of the sand out there in those littoral cells and where are they moving. You have an annual work plan. So each September, we meet with this group. We go over what a work plan looks like for your group to help support both Sandag and the region with shoreline management issues. And you'll see that again in September. We'll bring forward this next year's work plan to you. Today, we've been kind of like doing the meetings around themes. Today's theme is coastal monitoring. So you're going to hear presentations on coastal monitoring on many different aspects, whether it's state of science for sand, or whether it's citizen science, or even looking at surf monitoring. So I want to focus a little today, just really briefly, on the next possible regional beach sand project. So Regional Beach Sand Project, RBSP, that's what we acronym here at Sandag. Sandag has led 2 projects for you to take sand offshore and put it on the beach. We call this beach nourishment. It's done very much so in the East Coast, not as much in the San Diego region, but more so than in other areas of California. So in 2001, we did the RBSP1, where we took 2.1 million cubic yards of sand. We distributed on 7 beaches. That was followed up in 2012 by the Regional Beach Sand 2 project, where 1.5 million cubic yards of sand was placed on 5 beaches. It's been 12 years since the last project, and the jurisdictions from the coastal jurisdictions have asked, when's the next project? Over the last summer, actually a summer ago, we had a discussion with the coastal jurisdictions and said, we have identified 3 components of a regional beach sand project. The first part's the planning phase. Its feasibility, is it economically feasible? Is it the sand resources are there? What lessons have we learned from past regional beach sand projects? That cost was $200,000. And the idea was if we could get that funded and implemented, we become more attractive for getting federal and state grants, similar to what the city of Encinitas and Solana Beach has done in their projects. We have met with the coastal jurisdictions, and 4 of them have already taken action on a memorandum of agreement to fund that $200,000. 3 other jurisdictions are working out some details and taking to their councils this month. And the last coastal jurisdiction, we're still working with the city of San Diego. We'd like to see where they're at and help us find out if they'd like to fund this or not. So by next time we meet, I'd like to announce 2 things then. One would be that we're underway with the planning work for the Regional Beach Sand 3 project and have hired a contractor. So that's my commitment to you that in your June meeting, we'll be doing that, and we'll be on our way to the next Regional Beach Sand 3 project. With that, I'd like to conclude and turn it back to the chair for any questions.
Thank you, Keith. Anybody have any questions they wanted to ask Keith at this point? There's a lot of depth that he covered, and I would encourage you to follow up individually if you want to learn in detail. But if anybody has a question right now, let's take a minute or 2 and see if we can answer them. Kelly.
Just a logistics question. Did you say that we choose one offsite meeting location every year for this group?
Yes, we work on one location, and we typically have it offsite. And so if any jurisdictions want to offer, we'd be happy to pick them up on that.
Anybody else? I'm not seeing any hands, so let's move along. The next item on our agenda is approval of the meeting minutes. And did everybody have a chance to look at them? And if so, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes if somebody would care to make it.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion on the minutes? Not seeing any. Could we call the roll, please?
I would like to confirm that we have no public comments on this item, and we can do the vote by hand raised, Chair.
Okay. And did you say there is no public comment? I apologize for skipping over that. Thank you. All right. All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes, raise your hand. I'm seeing unanimous. Any opposed? Any abstentions? No, unanimous. All right, thank you.
I apologize. There was one abstention
I'm sorry, did I miss that?
from
Sorry.
the U.S. Navy.
All right, so that brings us up to our first report, and this is going to be from about CoSNAP program. Dr. Julia Fielder is going to make a presentation to us from Scripps about her program and how to involve citizen scientists in it. So Dr. Fielder, wherever you are, come on up. The floor is yours.
I have a show and tell item. Is that okay?
Excellent, we like that.
Okay. So hi, thank you for having me. My name is Julia Fiedler. I am an assistant project scientist at the Coastal Processes Group at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And today I'm going to talk to you about a pilot program that we had at Torrey Pine State Beach with the CoSNAP Citizen Science Beach Monitoring Program. And essentially what this is you take a photo of the beach, and we can take those photos of the beach and turn them into maps. And so anybody can take these photos, and the way that we make the maps is that we have a cradle that is being passed around right there. You actually put it on its side. You'll see a little bit later. And in that way, we can always have the photos taken in the exact same spot, the exact same location, pointing in the exact same field of view. Next slide, please. I have a clicker. Hit green. Green. Okay. So I'm coming to you from a vantage point of someone that's interested in coastal flooding. So I care about knowing what the beach is doing because that helps us get better predictions for accurate and early flood warnings, and also get a good baseline observation for adaptation strategies. So frequent monitoring, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but frequent monitoring of the beaches are important for understanding where our sand is going, how we can better manage our shorelines, and then understanding what our beaches are made of, whether it's sand or cobble, how that changes seasonally or even quicker or beyond that. I'm also interested in understanding what the beach slope does, because that particular parameter is important for understanding how far the waves are going to make it up the beach to potentially cause coastal flooding. So we're looking at a picture of Torrey Pine State Beach here, and you'll notice that this is a summer beach. It is wide, it is sandy. There's plenty of places for people to walk along the beach. And then as we head into the winter, it becomes covered with cobbles, and the beach is a lot more alongshore variable. So you see these beach cusps, these changes in where the sand and the cobble is. So our group, the Coastal Processes Group, collects a lot of in situ data, and we are also moving into remote observations as well. So the kind of data that we collect for monitoring these beaches, we use LiDAR. We have jumbo surveys that involves getting an ATV, a jet ski, and someone to walk into the surf zone to measure the beach that way. We also have wheelies that are a little bit more low tech, but they can scoot around the beach and measure the beach that way. We have drones doing structure from motion, taking pictures of the beach. And we also incorporate airborne LiDAR in order to make our long-term beach change studies that you're going to hear about from Sri. And more recently, we're moving into remote observations. So that includes incorporating satellite data, video monitoring, and then lastly, we have the snapshots. And the snapshots is where CoSNAP comes in. So a brief introduction to CoSNAP. This is a global program. It started in 2017 by Dr. Mitchell Harley and his group in Australia. And since 2017, it's really taken off across the globe. It's a way to let anybody who goes to the beach take a picture and contribute to a global database of coastal change. So essentially, as a user, the way it works is you put your phone in the cradle, you lay it on the side, make sure that the camera is in that little opening for the cradle, and then you submit a picture either via a QR code that is on the cradle itself or using the official CoastSnap app. And then those photos are sent to a database, which anybody can download and do analysis on after that. So we have a dashboard at Scripps of the sites that we manage. Right now, we have 3 locations, one at Torrey Pines, one at Scripps, and one at Marine Street in La Jolla. So the Torrey Pines location is what I'm talking about today, and this is at the Guy Fleming Trail at the lookout of Guy Fleming. So it looks north into Del Mar from that location. And we're getting about 7 pictures a day via the QR code, via the CoastSnap app. We've gotten about 7 total pictures since we installed the cradle in August of last year. The nice thing about this dashboard is that you can go, thank you. You can flip through and look at certain events if you're interested in these events. So for example, in early January this year, we all know maybe that we had some very, very large waves that came through. And you can go back and look at the pictures that were taken during that time. So how it works if you wanted to install your own station, you can get designs from the University of New South Wales. The CoastSnap program itself does not provide the cradles. You have to make the cradles on your own or know someone that has some cradles. At the Torrey location, usually there's signage that goes along with this cradle, but we were asked to keep the signage to a minimum. So we only have a sticker and a QR code, but it seems to be working quite well. I'm happy to share the designs for this cradle if you're interested in having one where you are. So for the initial setup, if you want to use this for any sort of quantitative data, you do need to consider how you're going to install it carefully. A lot of CoastSnap cradles can be installed wherever you want. Pointing at the beach, you can make some nice videos, but if you want to get actual measurements of the beach and how it's changing, then you need to be very precise in how you set it up. And so what you'll need to do is survey in the cradle itself and then survey points in the picture that you can see that are easily identifiable. Something like a corner is very helpful. And if you have a curving beach, then you can look at something that's far in the distance. That helps us turn a regular picture into a map if you have all that information. One other thing to keep in mind is that you want to have your cradle as high as possible above the beach. That gives you a nice field of view. Put your beach in the center of it so that there's less distortion around the image. And if there is distortion, it doesn't matter for the portion of the beach that you really care about. For more information on this, I encourage you to check out Dr. Mitchell Harley's YouTube channel, where he does go through how to set this up. And there is also a CoastSnap users workshop coming up in May of this year. For processing the pictures, again, this is if you want to use it for quantitative data, you can download a toolbox and you can download a toolbox and get it working in MATLAB, which is proprietary software. And in doing so, you can rectify the image. And by that, I mean you do turn the image into a map. And then you can make shorelines with that. You can also make movies. So as far as setup goes, it's fairly easy. You just have to change a couple things in a database. But you do need someone there to work with the analysis afterwards, after you set this up. And again, I encourage you to check out the YouTube channel if you are interested in something like this. So here's an example of the kind of movies that can be made. This is at Torrey Pines, starting from August into February. And we're looking at a time series of beach widths here on the bottom. And so that red line is the shoreline that is automatically detected by the CoastSnap toolbox. And so you notice that sometimes it's a little bit wonky, which means that you do need to have a human on the other end making sure that it makes sense. But you can get a nice idea of how the beach is changing and where the locations of most erosion might be, something like that. Some other example products that you can get from this, you can track not only beach width. At Torrey Pines, we're looking at beach cusps, how those change along the beach. We're looking at cobbles and where those go. Cobbles are these round rocks that are on the beach like this, about the size of your fist. And then I'm also going to show some other data that we have looking at river plumes or stuff coming out of the estuaries. So in order to get your beach width measurements, we have transect lines that are run every 100 meters in the alongshore, and they're pictured here. This is an actual photo from the CoSnap cradle. And so I've overlaid our transect lines that we have on top of this. CoSnap will pick up where that shoreline is. And the idea is that you want to get beach width measurements that are coming from the back beach. That's this. Can you all see the green thing on your side? Maybe not. Nope. Okay. I'm not going to use that. From the rocks at the edge of the beach all the way up to the shoreline. And then if you want to get more precise, in order to actually get a beach width, you do need to project that shoreline down to mean sea level. So it can get a little bit complicated. You need to assume what the beach slope is. You need to assume what the waves are doing at any given time when that picture was taken. And in some cases, the difference between the shoreline, the instantaneous shoreline that comes out of the snapshot will be quite different from where the projected shoreline is. And that is likely where the most error comes from when you're doing analysis on the CoSnap data. Thank you for that mouse. I don't know who's doing that, but that's great. Okay. So here's some example data that can come out of this. We're looking at on the bottom of the plot here, we're looking at time, and we're looking at the change in the beach width over time. And each one of these little purple X's is one picture that was taken by a beachgoer. And you'll notice that as we go through time, this black line that's sort of tracking all those little X's, there's a lot of wiggles in there, there's a lot of noise. And we have two darker triangles, and those are our quarterly jumbo surveys. And so you can see that the CoSnap data is actually matching quite well with the in situ surveys that we're getting by driving an ATV on the beach. Now we can add other transects on top of this. You notice it gets a lot more noisy, but you can also see that the beach is changing in certain areas more so than others. And again, that high variability is still in there. And then if we add in all of our in situ surveys, so that includes all the ways that we're measuring the beach at Torrey Pines, which is quite often, you'll notice that the CoSnap data is matching quite well with what we get with just a little bit of noise. And you can improve some of this data by understanding what the waves are doing. And that's part of what our group is trying to do to make the CoSnap data unique. If you include that high wave event that was happening in January of this year, you can improve things a little bit in terms of making that data match. So this is a work in progress. This is only 6 months of data, but we are really excited by the promise that CoSnap has in terms of complementing our in situ surveys. So now I'm going to show some other videos that are just kind of fun to look at and get ideas for. So one of these is looking at beach cusps over time. I've got a lot of data plotted on here, but what I want you to note is how the beach is changing as we head into the winter where all of these large waves occurred. That bottom plot is showing the waves at this location. Yep, over time. Thank you, pointer. And you'll notice in January, the waves got huge, the beach cut back, cobbles started to appear. So we can start to see what's going on at the beach without actually being there, which is pretty nice. And we don't have to have a running camera either. This is all citizen contributed data. Another fun thing to look at, we recently had an experiment coming out of Scripps, which was the plumes and nearshore conditions, where a bunch of pink dye was released from Los Penasquitos Lagoon. And we had someone stationed at the CoSnap cradle taking a picture every 2 minutes. And you can see that pink dye as it comes out of the estuary gets tracked by the surf zone and starts moving north and south. So what's interesting about this is that CoSNAP cannot only be used just for looking at beach data, but understanding the fate of, say, effluent or stuff that comes out of the estuary. So some of the benefits and drawbacks of this particular technique for monitoring the beach is that, number one, for benefit, it's pretty cheap in terms of your investment. You can accomplish a lot with very limited resources. The other thing that is a slight drawback is that the data can be pretty noisy. You're using data from a lot of different cameras. You don't necessarily know how people have placed the camera in the cradle. That's hard to control for. But even with all that noise, if you have a lot of pictures that have been taken, you can get a good signal. I won't discuss all the other photo submission challenges, including selfies, but they're out there. Trust me. So in terms of concluding remarks, I encourage you to visit hostnap.com if you want to learn more about this program. You can also download the Spotter On app and learn more about how this works. There are resources for establishing your own CoSNAP cradle. If you check out this link that you all should have received in the handout. And then lastly, I'm going to leave you with a question about the future of CoSNAP in California. There's a new effort that's coming through probably in the next year or so to establish at least 12 more stations for CoSNAP. This is an effort that's coming out of UCLA. And it's possible that the way that we collect our data is going to be slightly different based on what's happening in the future. But at the moment, I don't know that much. So I'm just telling you, there is a future work in progress for how CoSNAP is going to be enacted in California. So with that, I'll leave it open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fielder. That's fascinating. And before I ask if there are working group member questions, let me ask, is there anybody in the audience that wanted to make a public comment on this? Or Tessa, do we have anybody on the line that wanted to comment?
I do not have anyone here for public comments, but I do have 2 public commenters online.
Okay, let's go ahead and call the public commenters online.
Mr. Blair Beekman, you may go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thanks a lot for this item. It's nice to learn about it. And it just helped me think about, I've been visiting this area in Maui recently and with its sand issues or sand erosion issues. And it's a sad situation. And they're putting in a lot of new sand to try to replace the beach, but that sand is just getting eroded away as well, and going down current and creating problems down current a bit. So this was interesting just to kind of get my head thinking about choices for that area. And as always, what you're going to be doing about erosion issues here in the San Diego area as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next online speaker.
Our next speaker is Lynn Gibson. You may go ahead.
Hi, yeah, this is just a question. I see one of these CoSNAP apparati on the Grandview staircase in Encinitas facing north towards Carlsbad. I was just wondering if you knew who is collecting that data and what they might be doing with it. Thank you.
Dr. Fielder, if you want to take a quick answer to that, go ahead.
Can I hand over the microphone
Sure.
to the people that are collecting it?
Sure. The question is about CoSNAP up in Grandview Avenue.
So I'm Todd with Encinitas. Yeah, we're basically collecting it through Survey 123. So I think we had 500 photos last year. And so there was a study done for the overall year. At this point, we're just collecting the photos. So our IT division basically handles that at this point.
Is that information available online somewhere too for the public?
Not yet, but we're kind of working towards that.
All right, let us know when it is and we'll spread the word. All right, thank you. As a commenter, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. And is that it for speakers, Tessa?
Thank you. That concludes the public comments.
All right, thank you. Let's then members of the working group, if you have a question, it would certainly be appropriate to ask it, or if you don't have a question, you want to make a comment, that's appropriate too. Paloma.
Thank you. So do you have any stations down in South Bay, South San Diego?
We do not at the moment. Imperial Beach is definitely on our
I would
list of.
love to have a few in our beach and happy to partner with you all to do that.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Kelly?
Yeah, I've noticed our co-snap at Grandview as well, and I'm curious to know, does the city provide scripts with the data that we're collecting there? And is that helpful for the data that you're interpreting, or is this sort of just an independent project that we'll use as we so desire?
Is that a question specifically for the Grandview location?
More so how jurisdictions are feeding into the bigger project.
Well, I'm not sure that I can answer that question in terms of jurisdictions. I mean, I'm interested in it from a science point of view, and how we can analyze this data and make it a little bit more refined. So I'm speaking to you from the science end of things, not necessarily associated with any sort of district necessarily.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments from the working group? Mitch?
Thank you, Dr. Dillon. That was very fascinating.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you just turn your microphone on, please?
Oh, I thought I was pushing it. Is that better? Okay.
Yes.
So thanks for that. It was really fascinating. Representing Surfrider, I definitely want to take that back to our chapter and see if there's interest there from our volunteers. It sounds like anyone can do this as long as they commit. So yeah, really awesome. I had one question and then one suggestion. I'll start with the question. When you had that slide with the pink dye release that happened recently at Los Penasquitos Lagoon, and you said that people were using the Coast Snap to document that, you showed an image, but the image looked like it was a satellite view. So can you maybe explain how, I'm interested in that technology.
Sure. So it looks like a satellite view, but those are pictures that were taken from the cradle. Yep. So anything that's taken from the cradle gets turned into basically a map, and it looks like it's from a satellite. It's pretty remarkable that you're able to do that.
Whoa, very cool.
Toy Plains is really high, so that helps with making it look like a satellite.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was confused about that. That's the coolest thing I've heard so far today. The next thing is just a quick suggestion, and this is something that happened at Surfrider, and I can't help but pay it forward and call in about this because someone called us out for it a couple of years ago, is that we used to use the term citizen science for, you know what I'm about to say, about our Blue Water Task Force, which was, community water quality testing. And I imagine someone called us out because it's not exclusive to citizens. And if I'm a citizen, but if I was maybe a dreamer, I might feel excluded or that might be off-putting to me. So we changed the term and we use the term community science now. And I would just encourage Scripps to do the same.
Yes, thank you very much for the suggestion.
Other questions or comments? Then let me say thank you on behalf of all of us, Dr. Fielder. This is fascinating. We love the concept of community members participating in legitimate science. And let me ask one question. What can we do to help at this point? Should we go back to our home agencies and encourage everybody to get out there and put their phone in the cradle and start shooting pictures?
That would be great. I mean, more data, the more better. More data, more better. That's correct, right? Yeah, I think that, having a number of pictures in there helps definitely reduce the noise, make that signal a little bit more clear. And then in terms of if there is a place that you would like to monitor, then I encourage you to go find a good vista that has a nice view of the beach and is fairly tall, and hopefully you can make it work.
All right, thanks again. And for our members of the working group, you can all carry that home and start thinking about where you might want to do it in your community. All right, so we are ready to move on. This was just an information item, so we don't need to vote on it. The next item is item number 5, which is a prototype regional sediment management system. Sorry. Item 4. Did I skip something? Sorry. Whatever its number, it is prototype regional sediment management system for Oceanside's littoral cell. And Sri Gopal, also from Scripps Institute, will be presenting an overview of the development and analysis of a sediment budget model created for Cardiff State Beach. So Sri, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to join here today. My name is Sri, and I'm currently with the California Ocean Protection Council as the Coastal Habitats Program Manager. But today I'm going to be talking about my research work as a grad student at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, working on a sediment budget model for Cardiff State Beach. This one. Got it. Sorry. Okay, so this is a beach in Encinitas. On the left, it's about 10 meters wide with barely enough dry sand to lay your towel down on a warm summer day. Right? And this beach, also in Encinitas, in contrast, is about 60-meter wide and provides a great opportunity for recreation over the summer. And the one on the right is Cardiff State Beach. And Cardiff State Beach always hasn't looked like this. In the 1930s, it was just a narrow strip of sand, much like the beach on the left. But since then, human intervention in the form of coastal development, such as the Highway 101 right there, and sand, the RBSPs, the regional beach sand projects, and routine bypassing have widened the beach. And the wide beach is not important just for a recreational purpose, right? There's also the element of buffering the highway, the coastal infrastructure from the ocean. So today, I'm going to be talking about an analysis and development of a model that we built at the Coastal Processes Group to predict beach width for Cardiff State Beach using a sediment budget approach. So the goal for me was to predict beach width through 2050 for Cardiff State Beach. And in order to do this, we developed a model and then validated it to make sure that it was fit for purpose. And the third piece was an interesting synergy here that I'll also be talking about later, is how the beach width interacts with the living shoreline dune, which is a hybrid coastal feature present on this beach that serves as a coastal resilience option for the beach. And the work is really important because the impact that research such as this has are on coastal infrastructure, on recreation, how people view beaches and public access to beaches such as this, the ecosystems surrounding the beach that's right in the lagoon, the San Elijo Lagoon is right around this beach, and property around the beach. And decisions such as, do we add more sand to this beach to widen it? Or, how is the dune working in to synergize with the beach width are important coastal management decisions that managers would like to, make in a data-driven manner. And in order to do this work, we rely on the support and engagement of several stakeholders, such as SANDAG, the state parks, the city of Encinitas, the academic community, as well as the public. So for today's talk, I'm going to be focusing just on the beach width projection and touch on some implications for coastal management. This is just a foundation of, work to come and can inform several decisions upfront. So the sediment budget model that I'm going to be talking about is built on data sets spanning over 20 years. And this refers to really the inflow and outflow of sand that feeds into beach width measurements. Julia spoke about how the beach width measurements are made all the way from the back beach to the mean shoreline location. There are 5 elements that feed into the sediment budget model here. Number 1 is bypassing. The feature that you see in the top there, that's the San Elijo Lagoon. And bypassing refers to removal of sand, the sediment from the lagoon inlet and placing it in the nearshore zone of the beach, thereby contributing to the beach volume. And bypassing is incredibly important here because 1, it gives more sand to the beach, and 2, by enabling tidal circulation into the lagoon, it promotes recovery of the estuarine habitats that is associated with the lagoon. So it's really a win-win for the beach. The second piece, this is a picture of, if you've driven past 101, this is something that you see pretty routinely. This is the bypassing operation in the San Elijo Lagoon happening right here. The second piece that positively feeds into beach width is the sand nourishment projects. This refers to removal of sand from an offshore bay area, offshore borrow area, like the San Diego Bay, and then placing it on the beach. And this beach has undergone two significant nourishment projects. This is the RBSP 1 and 2 in 2001 and 2012, and it's definitely benefited with the additional sand that's made it, that's contributed to the current width of the beach. The third piece, oh, sorry, this is the picture. These are huge operations. This is one of the beach sand placement projects in Encinitas. You see the bulldozers spreading the sand around in the nearshore area. It's pretty fantastic to watch if you've ever had an opportunity to do that. So the third piece, which is kind of a newer element to the beach, is the living shoreline dune. This is a vegetated sand dune that also serves as a coastal resilience feature to protect the highway from erosive wave events or extreme El Nino events. And in the case of extreme El Ninos, we've seen that the living shoreline dunes can serve as sand reservoirs and contribute sand to increase beach width. The two other pieces, and this is a closer look. This is an older picture. It definitely looks different now, especially after the erosive winters that we've had in the past couple of years. The fourth piece is the sea level change. It's right there. Thank you for the pointer. So this is a factor that as the sea level increases, you can imagine that that's going to reduce your beach width. And sea level rise also leads to exacerbation of coastal flooding events, such as the one that you see here in Imperial Beach. And the last piece is the El Nino seasonal oscillation. Suffice it to say that this is a climate pattern that all of you might be familiar with, wherein years with severe to moderate to severe El Ninos reduce your beach width by removing sand from the beach. And you can see that this beach, the La Jolla Beach, which was once sandy, following an El Nino event is all exposed cobble at this point. So all of these five factors feed into a beach width sediment budget model wherein we measure change in beach width based on contribution from each of these factors. So just diving a little bit deeper into the equation itself. So the delta X bar MSL is the change in beach width, and then it's composed of three distinct terms. One is the nearshore volume change, which, as I mentioned earlier, is contributed by the bypassing, the annual removal of the sand, the nourishment projects, if any, on a yearly basis, the volume that's lost because of the El Nino event, and the volume that's gained from the dune itself, from the living shoreline dune. The second piece is the ensocycle retreat and recovery. This is more of a multi-year, like cross-shore migration of sand between El Ninos, where the beach tries to recover from a previous El Nino by and tries to rebuild itself. And the last piece is the reduction in beach width caused by sea level rise. And all of these pieces, you see that in the graphic below, where the purple shaded area is our survey area, which is the nearshore volume for Cardiff Beach. South is on the left and north's on the right. So that's the extent of the beach itself. So basically what we've done is use the sediment budget model, plugged in the data sets from the last 20 years into the model. And the way these data are collected are using these cross-shore transects. Julia spoke about this earlier as well. And for Cardiff State Beach, we have about 20 transects. You see the red lines are the scripts, there's transects. And there are also two coastal frontiers transects that are shown in black for the same beach. So the way the data are collected for the scripts transects are using these jumbo surveys, which is a combination of the jet skis, the push dollies, where someone goes in with a dolly and measures the beach width and other parameters, and also the survey ATV. So this kind of gives you like a full cross-shore estimate all the way from the back beach down to about 10-meter depth, and gives you a nice estimate of beach width. This is a picture of the historical data set for Cardiff State Beach, and this is also available online in the Coastal Processes Group website and also as a story map, where you can see that the data for Cardiff, where it indicates where the El Nino years have been in gray. There have been 4 so far that's on this graph. The RBSP projects are shown here in yellow and 1 in green. In addition, there was a significant effort towards San Diego Laguna Restoration Project, which also served as a source of beneficial sand for the beach, and that's shown in blue. Thank you. And for Cardiff State Beach, what we can see is that between El Ninos, the beach nourishment and sand bypassing have really enhanced the recovery rate of the beach. Like between every El Nino, you can see that the beach is actually accreting, and the recovery rate has been estimated to be about 4 meters per year. And it also works for Cardiff because this is a system where sand is actually retained. And we've seen that using these past data sets. So that's an important consideration because given this model, it's also important to remember that Cardiff is somewhat of a closed system because you see the inflows match the outflows plus whatever is retained or lost in the system. So these data sets have really been foundational for plugging into the model to make sure that it's appropriate for projection. So how do we make sure that the model is appropriate? We want to have confidence that this model actually works for this beach. So we validate it. And the way we do this is by hindcasting. Take the model, use it to project what it would have looked like in the past 20 years, and compare that to actual observed data over the past 20 years. So what you see here is the results of the model validation. This is still pretty preliminary, but very encouraging that the predicted data sets, which is in purple that you see there, really line up with the 2 observed data sets, both the SIO survey data in red and the SANDAG data set in black. What is also encouraging is that despite the differences in frequency and location, the SIO survey data and the SANDAG Coastal Frontiers profile data are also like right on top of each other. This gives us a lot of confidence in both our observations and also that, in a way that our prediction can actually make sense of these observations in the past. So with that, I wanted to just jump right into 3 key results that I'd like to focus on for today. And one is that bypassing actually works in this system. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And the second piece is that there is definitely an interplay between the dunes and the beach. And the coastal managers might want to take this into consideration when making adaptive management decisions for the dunes. And the third piece is that, as expected, we see that El Ninos and sea level rise really do take a toll on beach width. Okay, let's jump right in. So this is a graph that shows projections of beach width through 2050. And what's on the y-axis is the mean beach width change. So if it's positive, it means the beach width is increasing. If it's below 0, it means you're seeing a reduction in beach width, right? And the 2 shaded areas in blue that you see are strong El Nino years. So that is an assumption that we are making in this model. We can make, we can make tweaks to this to ensure that we're capturing different frequencies of El Nino events. But these are some of the assumptions that are built in here. And the black lines, the sawtooth lines that you see there are the business as usual scenario, wherein you do a yearly bypass, see what happens to the beach over time. You can see the drop every time there is like a moderate El Nino, that's a smaller drop, but the strong El Ninos in blue, you can see the bigger drop in beach width. But overall, what I want everyone to take away from this is that, at least based on these preliminary data set, it looks like for Cardiff State Beach, projections look promising. You see about a 20-meter wider beach by 2050, just with routine bypassing alone. The shaded areas that you see are the uncertainties coming from multiple sea level rise scenarios. The low sea level rise scenario is the lower one, and then the higher end of the shaded area is the high sea level rise scenario. But regardless, this is important to keep in mind. I also wanted to consider 2 other scenarios where you might see a different result. And the second is, what if you don't have the same amount of sand to bypass? And then it turns out that even if you were to bypass with half the amount of sand, 5,000 cubic meters, 10,000 cubic meters, you would still be able to maintain the beach width or hold the line, which is seen in the yellow line there. The third scenario that I wanted to talk about is we do absolutely nothing, which is not the recommended scenario, but what happens if there's nothing in there? In that case, El Niños and sea level rise really take a toll, and the beach width is reduced to half of what it is currently. So that's definitely not a desirable one. Similarly, a question that might be very relevant to a lot of us in this room is, is nourishment significantly different from bypass, or is it just another way of adding sand to the system? What you see here is a hypothetical scenario. So say if you were to, do a nourishment effort every five years instead of a bypass, yearly bypass with an equivalent amount of sand. This could be more like 12 to 13 years realistically. But what you see is that even though the paths might look divergent in the initial decade, towards the end of the time, like around, sorry, I want to go back. Here. By 2050, it's pretty much a wash. They're very similar in how they impact the beach width. Both nourishment and bypassing have a similar outcome when it comes to sand. But this is all because the sand is actually retained in the system, and you see that impact at the end of the projection period. The third piece, the next piece I wanted to touch on was the interaction between the beach and the dune. So this is a picture of the dune from the 2021 winter erosive wave event. You can see the waves have just carved out the dune toe, and there was significant damage then, and there is more damage over this past 2022 coastal erosion events. And the bypass sand was used to repair the dune toe instead. So considering decisions such as future placement of bypass sand, do we want to place it on to repair the dune toe versus, have more on the beach to kind of enhance the beach width? And it's important to remember that the dunes serve as sand sources for beach during severe El Niños. And when it comes to, as I mentioned earlier, around the adaptive management decisions for the dunes, we want to think about how this interplay really plays out for the dunes and the beach. The third piece that I wanted to talk about was the sea level rise for California. This might be a graph that most of you are familiar with, but what I want to point out is these two scenarios here. The low sea level rise projection, which results in a 0.1 meter increase in sea level rise by 2050, versus the high, which is in the orange here. It's about a 0.4 meter rise by 2050. These are two extreme scenarios that I wanted to show here to see where the spread of the data is. On the left is a low where you see this sawtooth pattern again, but you see that in the low scenario, the sea level rise equivalent loss is only about a 14% of the beach width change. That's the blue line here. But then as you move into the high scenario here, the equivalent loss from sea level rise is this whole purple shaded area. That's about 50% of the net beach width change. And this really shows us how critical it is to consider this range of scenarios when we think about what the impact is as on the projected beach width. So we move through both. So with that, I wanted to wrap up this part of the work to say that, for this beach, consistent bypassing, which is based on these regional beach sand placement projects as a baseline, is the backbone of stabilizing this beach width. And this is really important for Cardiff, and you can actually see that with this routine bypassing, you can maintain or even enhance the beach width over the next 30 years. In the absence of human intervention, El Niños and sea level rise will take a toll on beach width and reduce it by half, about 25 meters. And the third piece that I really wanted to stress on is that continued stakeholder engagement, such as forum like this, where multiple stakeholders get to see and engage in this research, is really important, because this is just a preliminary step. And we're hoping that work such as this can enable data-driven coastal management decisions. I wanted to thank everyone who's been generous with their time and support for this project and helped me through finishing my capstone project last year. And with that, I'm happy to take questions from the audience. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much, Shri. That was a fascinating presentation. So let's see first if we have questions from the audience. Come on up, sir. and then we'll take online questions and then board members.
Fascinating presentation. Congratulations on that. I would just ask, have you had any thought to update your data to see how it predicts as new data comes in? Is there any ongoing project? Just 4 quick questions. I would be interested in seeing a table of the weights in your model, right? The constant that you start with plus the deltas, just to compare, to get some idea what the relative weights are for each of these processes that take place in your model. There seems to me that there's erosion from the storms coming from the beach, but there's also erosion coming from the shore and from the outlets. So you talk about the bypassing, and that tends to increase in extremes as well as the means. And so to some degree, can you get some of those extremes out of the models that you have? Because sometimes you look at the means and it's really these huge fluctuations of water flow, particularly in the outlets, that can swirl around and cause some of the damage, I believe. And then would you have a comment, maybe not here, but at some point, for the areas of the beaches that are eroding compared to Cardiff, which appears to be accumulating on large, which obviously it's taking from other places, but how the bypassing affects that or the other beaches and what those differences might be. Thank you for your time.
Before you leave, sir, just a lot of us know you, but could you state your name for the record?
I apologize. Timothy Bilash, Bilash. I am up in Del Mar area of I call it mid-county coastal San Diego.
All right. Thank you. And anybody else in the audience that wanted to make a comment or ask a question? I'm not seeing anybody, so let me ask Tessa, do we have anybody online?
Thank you. I have one virtual commenter, Blair Beekman. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman here. This is really interesting things. I had just come back from a trip to Hawaii, to Maui, and so, boy, to tune into this, it's really just exactly what I've been concerned with in visiting Maui and the Kaanapali area. They have an extreme example going on of sand beach erosion. And I'm interested in, what you were describing today. I mean, it sounds like you have a kind of a set pattern and routine and way to work to address, the beach issues. I guess using bypass is an important concept, but with so much sand that in the Kaanapali area that's traveling, southward, it's just dumping a ton of new sand into the coral reef areas that I question that the simplicity that you describe of the bypass process. I hope in the future, maybe you tried to talk about the dune issues a bit, to go into just the overall ecosystem of the area and how that all works together. The previous public comment person and what Cardiff area and Del Mar is really famous for is its inlet waters that go into the ocean area. And to learn how to incorporate all that together maybe can be helpful and useful in the future. There's really an awesome turtle population on the Maui coast, all along the Maui coastline, and I guess I'm talking about East Maui area. And there's an interesting turtle population in the Del Mar area too, in Cardiff area, that they could be a good example for yourselves in how to develop the ecosystem of the area and to continue it thriving and to continue, to make sure life can be sustained. Because, you talk about what you can do with these issues, but how is that sustaining the ecosystem of the area also in the future to describe those sort of issues can be really helpful. And I hope just you can look into the Kaanapali areas yourselves to help with their situation. I think they're headed for something of a disaster because I just feel all that so much sand that's going around would be a hindrance and not of help in the future, but I'm not sure. And they're going to need a lot of help from the incoming tributary systems to help, I think, with the minerals and such. good luck how to explain these sort of things in the future of our climate issues and how it all balances and works together. And thanks for this time, for this item.
Thank you for your comment. Tessa, anybody else?
That concludes the public commenters.
All right, let's, did you want to make a comment, Shri? I saw a hand go up.
Yes, I do want to respond to some of the questions that were raised earlier.
go
by
ahead.
The first public commenter, Dr. Bailash, I'm not getting that wrong. Yes, there's definitely ongoing work that's being done to refine the model. In fact, we are in the process of putting out a manuscript that deals with a lot of the questions that Dr. Bailash had raised around parameter estimates and how we go about making those estimates. A lot of the estimates are based on the historical data sets that have been collected for this beach area. And we are refining it through our work, through our continued monitoring and research. So I guess, I really want to say that this is not a static model. It's very simple, primarily because this is a small closed system, but it's by no means static. And definitely the idea is to expand on it and to apply it to other beaches in the state. I mean, in the local neighborhood and, even from the whole purview of the state. But I do want to point out that it is simple, but it's definitely, tells us some very key things that we could definitely follow up on in a data-driven way. And I think I missed a few of the other questions, but definitely continued monitoring and stay tuned for that paper. Ron's a co-author on the paper too. So if anyone's interested, it should be hopefully within the next year, it should be out there. And some of the preliminary estimates are also in the Scripps capstone report archive. If you search for my name, you should be able to pull up where the data came from, and it's all available in the public domain for anybody to take a look at and reanalyze if you have some spare time. But
Thank you so much. All right, let's see if we have members of the working group with questions and comments. Let's try to keep it overall to 5 minutes. We've still got 2 important items to get through, but let's have at it. Kelly, you want to go first, and then Dave?
Yes, two comments and one question. So the cubic yards is helpful for, I think, people that live in your world. And then sometimes there's a great way to translate that for those of us that aren't so embedded in it. And Jamie Timberlake, who's here one time, told me that maybe this most recent bypass added 4 acres of beach to this area. I could be wrong about that, but that's my recollection. Is that accurate?
Come on up, Jamie.
In June, and it's about 10,000 to 20,000 cubic yards. And then 1 cubic yard is about what you can put in the back of a pickup truck. That helps.
Yes.
Okay. Well, seeing it as that much as an acreage was really helpful for us to be able to communicate that to the residents of the city and saying like, we're not making more land, but we can make more beach in these ways. So just a suggestion if that's something that we're able to add when we consider the results. The second comment, let's see. Oh, yes. So the health of the lagoon is also really dependent on the bypassing. And so when we're talking about nourishing versus bypassing, I think as cities, it's really incumbent upon us to make sure that we're also keeping the health of lagoons in mind. So we're on the verge of doing this nourishment project in Encinitas, which will have impacts to our lagoon. And so just making sure that we're also adding bypass, even though we're getting these other great benefits through nourishment. And then the question I have, and I don't know if you delved into the scope yet, so don't feel like you have to answer it, but what you posed as the benefit of either adding the sand to the dunes or the beach itself, to me is a really important question because we're going to have to decide how to do that. And so just knowing what the benefits are if we add more sand to the dune versus more sand to the beach, can you elaborate at all on that?
So that's an important question and something that we've thought about. And, definitely like from a cost benefit perspective, there's also like the logistics of adding sand to the dune versus adding to the beach. And that from a perspective of the vegetated dune itself, does it benefit to have sand to the short answer is I don't have the answers. It's just considerations that coastal managers can think about as they make that decision. There are several factors that feed into it besides just cost. And I know, Jamie, when you and I spoke about this, I think maybe a year ago, we did touch upon some of those aspects of it because cost is a key consideration in bypassing versus bringing that sand to the dunes. And the other is the frequency of the severe erosive wave events. if they happen 2 years in a row, does it really make sense to go back and keep repairing the dune toe? Those are questions that I guess coastal managers are better equipped to answer, what the cost benefit analysis for that looks like. From a research perspective, it could go either way. It's just that the dunes in some way have served their purpose, right? They did buffer the highway from these erosive wave events. Otherwise, everything would have overtopped on the highway, and it would be a completely different situation if the dunes weren't present during these erosive wave events. So it really depends on what we want to see over the next few years. And I think last year's erosive storms also play an important role. I didn't talk about that today, but that's definitely going to be part of the discussion is how frequent are these events going to be? Do we want to, consider replacing the dune toe every year? Is it going to be every 5 years? So those are important considerations, but I don't have an answer to should we do it or not,
Thank you. That was a really stimulating presentation.
Thank you.
Dave.
Thank you, and agreed. Great presentation, great information. First question is just so I can better understand the data that you're showing. For my own clarity, has bypass been done on an annual basis here since the start of the data all the way back to 2002?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because that wasn't clear, and it makes a big difference as well. And so the other one, relative to, I guess, a generic question, I'll just make a comment, is you made some comment about trying to figure out how to apply the model elsewhere. I'm just curious how far that has gotten with respect to what parts of the model are extendable, useful, and being able to apply it elsewhere. And then sort of related to that, I'm curious if other locations have useful data that you've been able to find, particularly around some of the elements like the dunes. So I know, for example, that the East Coast, such as South Carolina, North Carolina, those areas, they've used dunes for decades. And I just don't know if there's data that exists on how effective those dunes are that you've been able to find or try to look into, or if it's even applicable to our situation as well.
Yes, so we're still trying to refine this model and spinning that out into this publication. Hopefully that will bring about more engagement from stakeholders to say we want to see this in other beaches or we want to expand this work, but that's definitely on the table. With respect to the dunes themselves, I didn't dive too deep into it as part of this project, but definitely an interesting consideration.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it would be really interesting. And the last, you talked about, we know one of the potential ramifications of climate change is just the frequency of potential events, but then the other potential impact, which I'm curious if you've tried to at least accommodate, is the scope of those potential events. One could envision that the El Nino years could be way worse than the bad ones even are now. For example, one could even envision that as climate change and warming happens, we could even start getting hurricanes here as a really bad event. And is that something that you've tried to take into account as well?
Some of those scenarios, not all of them,
Okay.
but definitely like frequency of El Niños, maybe the severity of El Niños, but not necessarily a hurricane scenario. That's not something we've considered for now. So
Okay.
still a pretty simplistic
Yeah, no, I know.
sort of a model.
It's
Simple,
great to
really
see
slow
regardless.
application.
Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Any questions from over here? Yes, Ron.
Let me add a few things here. First of all, the coastal setting in the East Coast and versus the West Coast. You really can't compare the dunes in Southern California, such as they are artificial or natural, with anything in the Carolinas or the Southeast. Those are hurricane driven. They're much lower relief coast, much wider littoral areas. The dominant erosion factors there are hurricane related. Excuse me. And those natural dune systems in the Outer Banks, for example, are essentially hurricane barriers. They're driven by hurricanes, and they also resist hurricane flooding, reaching far inland. Our coast is cliff. The beaches are generally much narrower. It's because of the tectonic setting. Our coast is much younger, measured in the 20 to 50 million year rather than 300 or 400 million years on the East Coast. So it's such a different geological setting that you don't really want to, try to compare or how to structure dunes on a narrow cliff coast like Southern California compared to the East. And the other thing I would like to emphasize, Sri said it, but perhaps the most important conclusion of Sri's work here is the importance of smaller, much more frequent nourishments on these kinds of systems. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't do, Sandag Nourishment 3. That's not the same thing. However, perhaps we should look into, as a region, we should look into some mechanism, some funding, some process for being able to, instead of every 10 years, doing, several tens of millions of cubic yards, doing much smaller nourishments much more frequently at many more places. Because that's really the outcome. I think the most important outcome of what you just saw is that small nourishments, in this case from bypassed sand that gets trapped in the lagoon and then put back on the beach, is absolutely critical to keeping this particular beach in a good condition. And that could also apply to other beaches in the region that either have natural retention, such as reefs. And this is another thing that came out of this. Cardiff State Beach is bounded by reefs on both ends. Now, they're relatively small, but it points out the importance of sand retention to keep these beaches wide. So those I think are the two lessons that perhaps this group can push in the future in the cities as well.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Flick. I think we're ready to move on. And just let me say thank you again to Shreves. This was fascinating, and we want to hear more about it as it goes along. And my simple-minded takeaway is it's pretty encouraging with relatively modest ongoing bypass installments in a dynamic system. We can have a beach in 2050 that's still pretty good. So that's great. And as Dave asked, if at some point we can extrapolate that and figure out what to do in other areas, that would be wonderful. All right, this again is just an information item, so we don't need to vote on anything. And now we're going to talk about surfing. And we're going to invite Chris Webb up, who's going to talk to us about a surf monitoring technique and lessons learned. Chris is with Moffitt and Nickel, and he's going to present us an overview of surf monitoring techniques and lessons learned from the surf study performed for the San Elijo Lagoon Restoration Project. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Dwight. This is basically a presentation of the work that was done by the Nature Collective, which is formerly called the San Elijo Lagoon Conservancy. And the person that did the work is Dr. Tim Stillinger. He was their science director, and he's gone to other things now, and Doug Gibson is the representative. So I'm here as their consultant to give the results of the surfing study. It's monitoring, basically, as was indicated by the standing chair. So I will advance the slides, and I may need a little bit of help with the arrowhead. Thank you very much. And I'll go ahead and show things, but if you could track me, that'd be great. The Sandag staff. So I'm sure a number of you are familiar with San Elijo Lagoon Restoration. That project was a restoration project that started in late 2017 and went through mid-2020. And the purpose of the project was to restore the lagoon physical conditions and biological conditions to a more historic condition, prior to man-influenced condition, to the greatest degree possible. So it was trying to make it a more physically hydraulically flushing lagoon by widening and deepening the channels to get water from the ocean upstream farther quicker, and by planting vegetation and habitat areas that would colonize, take root, spread, proliferate, and become a home for some of the sensitive species. There's endangered birds in the lagoon. So with that, the approach was to basically, this is an aerial of the lagoon, to take the channel network and widen and deepen them through excavation and dredging. And the channels are typically mud bottom. So there's a lot of excavation and dredging of mud. And there's a challenge in what to do with that material if there's a surplus of it. And there was about 500,000 cubic yards surplus of it. So the idea was, rather than hauling it off to a landfill or trying to find a place to put it nearby, is to find sand in the lagoon and dredge the sand out in the form of a pit, which there's a label called the overdredge pit right there. Thank you very much. That was all sand. And it was dredged 40 feet down from existing grade, about 450 cubic yards of sand dredged out of that. And that sand was pumped through a pipeline right over to Cardiff State Beach, 300,000 cubic yards of it placed at Cardiff State Beach. And then the remaining 150,000 cubic yards were placed at Solana Beach in the vicinity of Fletcher Cove and to the south. So a lot of sand was placed in the system. And because of that, it triggered a requirement to do surfing monitoring. So the result was a wider beach, a higher beach, nice sandy beach habitat. So the question was, how will this affect surfing in the vicinity of the project area and for sites adjacent to it that might be under the influence of sand movement or delivery to them? So the Nature Collective embarked on a monitoring plan. It was at the behest of the Coastal Commission and a condition of their permit. Dr. Tim Stillinger did the work. The photo in the upper left of him surfing is the only surfing photograph you're going to see in this whole presentation. This is all data driven. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of scenic slides. Sorry about that. I probably should have thought of that more carefully ahead of time. What Dr. Stillinger did was he had a couple of folks that were helping him, and they did monitoring two ways. They did it with just visual observation from the beach, looking at how many surfers are in the water, rating the quality of the surf on a particular day from poor to average to or fair to really good, just really qualitative based on their judgment. And then they were also noting the existence of backwash in the surf zone. And backwash is the enemy of the surfer. It basically knocks you off your board when it keeps you because it's coming the other way from where you're traveling if you're riding a wave. They also used something that was attached to the surfboard. He called it a puck. I think there's a different name for it. It's a GPS unit that collects data of where does a surfer start riding the wave? That's called the takeoff zone. Which direction does the surfer go? At what angle to the shoreline do they take? How far do they ride the wave? And how long in time, elapsed time, do they ride the wave? So those are the quantitative data measured. The surf breaks that were evaluated off of the lagoon were 3 sites to the north, which they call control sites in Encinitas, D Street, Swamis, and Pipes. Then there were 5 surf sites off of the lagoon and to the south, which were considered potential impact areas, which were Cardiff Reef, Georges, which is Cardiff State Beach, Seaside Reef just to the south of Cardiff State Beach, and then Pillbox and Cherry Hill in Solana Beach. So these were the sites that were considered to be potentially affected by sand movement and also direct sand placement. Just a quick overview of Swamis. It's a site that's world-renowned surf spot where you can take off on a wave where there's a reef submerged and you can ride it in both directions to the surfer's right or to the surfer's left, depending on which way the wave's peeling. Good job on Sandegg staffs with the arrowhead. And then there's George's, which is just a sand bottom beach break, which has parallel bathymetric contours. It's not like Swami's, it's not a reef, so it doesn't have a discernible right versus left. It's just a more random takeoff, and with good luck, you can go one way or the other, depending on the specific conditions of the time. Fletcher Cove has a reef right off it called Pillbox. It's a small submerged rock where you can take off where the arrowhead's showing it, and you can ride it either to the left or to the right, depending on which way the wave is approaching the shore and refracting, and which kind of luck you might have as a surfer. And then Cherry Hill is to the far south end of Solana Beach, and it's kind of similar to Pillbox, just larger, a bigger reef and a bigger surfing area. So these are just brief overviews. So now the data indicate that the number of surfers that surf when the surf is good exceeds the number of surfers that surf when the surf is poor. So these are called whisker plots. And basically at the control sites, it shows that before the project, which is the green boxes, versus after the project, which is the yellow boxes, there was a similar pattern of fewer surfers were in the water when the surf was poor. More surfers showed up and surfed when it was fair. And then when the surf was relatively good, there were the most number of surfers in the water. So this is kind of a chart from, let me see, I went forward, sorry, from left to right. Yeah, your arrowhead's doing a good job, pointed pipes. There is no difference between before and after patterns of use at these locations. They're basically used the same because they're control sites. But if we go to the next slide, which shows the impact sites, what it shows is that for when the surf is relatively poor or fair, there's the same number of folks in the water before and after the project in the green box and the yellow box. But then if you look at George's and you look to the far right, there's a big yellow box that shows, hey, the surf at George's got good after the project. The surf at George's was not rated good before the project. There's no green box there. So there were no folks going to George's when it was really good before the project. They were going to George's when it was really good after the project. Same thing at Pillbox Reef and Solana Beach, where you have that yellow box off to the right. It showed there was good surf. There were a lot of surfers in the water. That's a good thing. It didn't happen before the project. So we're attributing that to potential project benefits. And then Cherry Hill had the same thing. So it's not coincidental. The Nature Collective believes there's a relationship, and I do too. Then they also looked at the backwash coming off of beaches. They looked at the conditions before the restoration project, which are shown by blue bars. It also looked at backwash after the project was installed, which is shown by kind of an orange bar. And it shows that there's a lot of backwash at these sites before the project was put in place. After the project was put in place, there was less backwash. And I don't think the project reduced backwash so much. I just think the conditions for backwash to exist were in place before the project went on the ground. As the sand was placed on Cardiff Beach and Solana Beach, it was placed in such a way that there was a relatively flat slope from the beach fill up on the beach down toward the water. It wasn't a steep slope. So the relatively flat slope dissipates wave energy as waves rush up on the beach. They don't rush off the beach again, as would occur with a steep slope type of condition. And a backwash to a surfer is a bad thing. It's like a fast moving speed bump coming at you. Difficult to navigate. And then the puck data collected by the surfboard instrument showed that there were about 2,800 waves ridden by the monitors at these different spots, the control sites and then the impact sites. Great job, by the way, over there, Tessa. Thanks a lot with the arrowhead. And the majority of waves were ridden at places like Cardiff Reef, Pipes, and Seaside. So that was the favorite, I guess, of the monitor. And when we looked at the control sites, what we noticed was, well, if we look at the length of ride that occurred at the control sites of D Street, Swamis, and Pipes, there wasn't much of a difference before and after project. There was kind of a pattern of longer rides, a higher probability of rides that were mid-length, maybe 40 meters long at D Street, for example. And then it would tail off and there'd be even longer rides. It was the same before and after the project at each of these sites. There really is no pattern. But when you look at after project and you look at sites that were affected by the project, Pillbox Reef shows after project, there was a higher proportion of rides that were relatively long. 75 meters is a long ride. If you're a surfer, you can remember that one. At Cherry Hill off to the right, there was a similar pattern before and after restoration, but then there's this outlier to the far right there near the 20-meter mark that didn't show up before restoration, suggesting there was an abnormally long ride at Cherry Hill or a series of rides that probably were a result of the sand filling in behind the reef as sand moves from the Fletcher Cove site toward the south, toward Cherry Hill. The sand deposits along the beach and fills in between Pillbox Reef and the beach and between Cherry Hill Reef and the beach, allowing for longer rides at those sites. And then the ride time, elapsed time that's measured by the unit as well. There was no discernible difference before and after project at the control sites represented by these three histograms. But then when you go to the impact sites, there was longer rides at Pillbox Reef as shown by the orange bars. Thank you very much for circling that extreme one. 50 seconds is a really long ride, by the way. Anybody who gets one of those is going to talk about it for a long time. And then there was the occurrence at Cherry Hill as well. So what we're seeing is that there was a change to surfing, but it was a positive effect at Cardiff Beach, which is called George's. There was also a positive effect at Pillbox and Cherry Hill and Solana Beach. We believe it's directly related to the project. The positive effect eventually normalized and became a pre-project condition over about a year after the sand was placed. So it was it wasn't super long term, but it was sufficiently long to be noticeable. There were more surfers in the water at George's and Pillbox and Cherry Hill after construction than before, which suggests guys were attracted to the area because they had heard it was good and they saw it was good. So they went down and enjoyed it themselves. There was less backwash post-construction. The statement up there says no backwash, which isn't correct. That's a typographical issue. It should have been said less backwash. And that's just because the project was constructed sensitively to that. There were longer ride distances at certain spots that were within the impact area of the project, and there were actually longer ride times. So eventually what was concluded was there wasn't an adverse impact from this project on surfing. In fact, there was a positive impact to neutral, and it was relatively short-lived. So with that, the conclusions are just what I've said. There was improvements over short timeframes at certain sites. There weren't adverse impacts. That's the good news. It showed that nourishment of the magnitude of this project under these conditions, this location can actually avoid causing detrimental impacts and can potentially provide benefits, which we saw. And that future studies should probably focus on fewer sites and or have more monitors collecting data so we have more data to look at and statistically analyze and potentially do it over a longer period of time. There was limited budget to do it for much more than a year after construction, so that's why it was halted. And so if you want more information, contact the client, Doug Gibson at the Nature Collective, and he can put you in touch with me too, if you need that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was fascinating. I'm going to ask the public to hold your questions and comments, and we're going to go through the next item and we'll take comments at the end. I want to make sure we don't run out of time for one more presentation that's important. But if there's anybody on the working group that has a comment or question that you feel is important to make now before it slips away, now's your chance. All right, let's move on to our final item then, and we'll come back to questions and comments at the end. Our final item is a new molecular methodology for water quality analysis. Heather from the County of San Diego will present an overview of their new molecular methodology system that provides updates on coastal and bay water quality in real time. Heather, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. And for the clicker, the large screen. Okay. All righty. Well, hi, I'm Heather Bonomo. I'm the Director of Environmental Health for the Department of Environmental Health and Quality, and I have with me Amy Harper in case there's any questions that I need her assistance on during this. We're both happy to be here today, and I've really enjoyed all the presentations so far. For our beach water quality monitoring program, it exists for the purpose of preventing recreational water illnesses in our community. And we do that through raising public awareness as to what that water quality is. Our team is out there on a daily basis collecting samples, communicating those sample results, taking beach management actions as necessary, such as advisories or closures being issued, and going out in the community and doing public outreach and education on beach water quality monitoring. So we are implementing the California Health and Safety Code. It is a state mandated program, but the state mandated program has some specific criteria that must be met to qualify for the beach water quality monitoring. And that is, it applies to beaches with more than 50,000 visitors annually, beaches that have summer runoff, maybe they're near a stormwater outfall. The sampling is applicable April through October, and there's specific bacteria, they're indicator bacteria for recreational water illness that we're testing for. And then we also work in partnership with other agencies throughout the county to collaborate on any sampling that they're doing as well. So here's a little picture, and that map is from our website, SB Beach Info, which we update every single day on the current day's water quality conditions. And we have 45 sampling locations that DEHQ is taking samples at, and there's 54 other locations that our partner agencies that I just mentioned are sampling. So in our 70 miles of coastline, there's about 99 total locations that are being sampled. But there's a lot more that we're looking at than just taking those samples out there. So on a daily basis, we're looking at the the swell conditions. We're looking at the plume tracker. We're looking at the flow of the TJ River, wind conditions. All of those play a really critical role in what is happening in our beach water quality. So outside of our state mandated program, the San Diego County Board of Supervisors has enacted what we call the South County Enhanced Program. to really monitor some of the unique conditions that we have in southern San Diego. What they've done is funded a program where we are sampling these beaches on a daily basis so that we can keep a close eye on the water quality in our South County. This slide is lovingly borrowed from the US EPA because it just does a really great job of kind of depicting some of the sources of contamination for the water that is going into our South County beaches, which is flows from the TJ River Valley. Thank you for the arrow. And as well as contaminated water coming from Punta Bandera and coming up north during south swell conditions. Both of those bringing sewage contaminated water from failed sewage infrastructure just south of the border. So with those unique conditions in the South County, for years, the community has said, you know, what is in our water? Why is it taking so long to get results? Years ago, back in about 2012, when we kind of started the journey to find DDPCR, our beach water quality samples took 3 days to get results back. And so really that wasn't reflecting what our daily changing conditions were here in San Diego. And so people wanted to know, what is today's water quality? And, you know, we wanted to know, is there a simpler and better way to get these results faster? And so the answer to that was PCR. And so we kind of embarked upon a journey to figure out how we could, you know, answer this question for the community. And so I mentioned back in 2012, the turnaround time for those sample results was 3 days. So we started looking at PCR. We initially started with qPCR, and in 2013 did a small scale study. The results of that study were not very good as far as it being a tool for us to implement. But there was a lot of other things that needed to occur before we could even move forward with having an approved method. There wasn't alternative methods approved in state law for us to use. And so in 2014, San Diego County Board of Supervisors sponsored state legislation that was enacted that then allowed for using different methodology to test beach water quality. From there, in 2015 to 2017, a working group was formed. We worked closely with California Department of Public Health, US EPA, SQUIRP, UCSD, kind of bringing together all of the great minds to embark upon a study. And we began studying digital droplet PCR. In 2017, we went deeper into looking at an analysis between EntoAlert and DDPCR. EntoAlert is the methodology that was being used just prior to DDPCR. And that at the time was giving us a 24-hour turnaround on our samples. So we went from 3 days to 1 day, but we still needed to do more. 24 hours is still giving you a delay in what's happening at the beach that day. And so 2017 to 2020 worked on doing that comparative study and analysis. That was then published in 2021, and we started to receive final approvals from US EPA and working on the state approval. And then on May 5th of 2022, we received all final approvals and were able to implement DDPCR testing, which gives us a same-day results on our beach water samples. So currently our teams are out there at the beaches about 6 a.m. collecting samples. They're back to our lab around 8 or 9 a.m. And we have those samples back between 3 and 6 p.m., depending on the batch size of samples that day. So it enables us to take beach action that same day if there's concerns at the beach. So what does that beach action look like? It looks like advisories if there is a bacterial exceedance. So state law sets a threshold for bacteria. If you exceed that level, an advisory is issued. And then the state law also has beach closures if there's sewage or chemical contamination. It's more common to see a sewage contamination that would result in a closure. But going back to our unique South County conditions, in addition to DDPCR implementation last year, we also implemented a warning tier. And so state law has the advisories and the closures. but there really wasn't something to speak to our unique conditions in the county of San Diego in the south. That was, when we know that there are south swells coming, pushing contaminated water north to our beaches. And so we developed the warning tier, and this tier is implemented when there's a bacterial exceedance and there's a south swell condition. So we know that there's high bacteria and we know that sewage is coming. And so we issue a warning to give the public more notification on what's going on with their water quality. When sewage does reach our beaches, that results in a closure at that closure for water contact. So we notify the public in a variety of methods when we do have to issue an advisory warning or closure. We have our SD beach info. We like to call it check-in before you get in. And that is updated daily. And you could see on the right-hand side of the screen where there's the green balloons and the red balloons. The green shows that beach is open. If there's a yellow, that identifies an advisory, and a red would identify a closure. We post signage at the beach access points. We use social media. We send emails to beach managers. And then again, we also have our website. So getting the information out there in a variety of ways. If there is a closure issued, we will also issue a press release to ensure that as many people as possible are notified of what's happening at the beach that day. So sharing a little bit of data here on our beach water quality. On the left, you see the total closures. This is 2022 data, and then the total number of days they were closed. And I would like just to bring you down to the bottom line of that chart where it shows all non-South County beaches. So you can see the disproportional impact in our South County versus every other beach in our county. There was only a total of 6 closures and a total of 10 days that those beaches were closed for sewage contamination. On the right, we have on the top, just a little bar chart of advisories, warnings, and closures by beaches in the South County. And down below, you can see total advisories by year. And you could see that last year, 2021 and 2022 are both pretty similar in advisories. These advisories can be impacted by a variety of things. Storms, if you see in 2019, there's 153. That was a year there was some hurricanes south of us, and that was really pushing up a lot of different things in our waters. So there's a lot of different areas the bacteria can come from that would cause an advisory. We have a variety of resources and information. If you're looking to learn more, you can always reach out to me, but we also have information on our website. We post daily on the beach management actions. And then we have a lot of information about DD-PCR, the testing, frequently asked questions, as well as that bottom one right there is the State Water Resource Control Board. And they post the beach sampling data for the entire state on that website. So that's something that everybody can look at and see our data and how that compares to the rest of the state as well. And with that, I've provided my contact information, but happy to answer any questions you may have now.
Thank you very much, Heather. And we've got about 5 minutes left. We're going to try to end on time, which is 1:30. So let me ask if there are working group members that have a quick question, and then we'll hopefully have some time left for public comment at the end. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the presentation. The PCR, by the way, I'm from Coronado, so I have, along with IB, we have great interest in this. The advantage of this new test is obviously how quickly we get the results and we can report them and manage access to the beach. At this point, are we convinced that the results of the new test line up with the results of the old test? In other words, there's no discrepancy in what the new test is measuring and the guidelines that are set in place that say there's a problem as compared to the old method?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that we went to the new testing method and why it took over 11 years to implement is we did a lot of extensive testing on the methodology, and we did that in cooperation with US EPA and CDPH. And so the methodology and the reason we went to this test is that it is more accurate and it is faster. And so there hasn't been any concerns with comparison of that methodology or the current testing method.
So the county is saying, yeah, the new test is fine as is? Because I know you've heard this before, but when the new test was initiated, coincidentally or not, all of a sudden, the very next day, we're closing all our beaches. And it
Yeah.
just seemed a little too coincidental. And I know some of our staff are working with you probably directly and your staff to convince ourselves that it is right. But yeah, it just didn't seem coincidental to us. So I guess I'll leave that as a comment. The other thing I'll say that at least in our city, the new designation, the warning, there's a huge amount of confusion with that because what that seems to say is, yeah, the bacteria is high. It's higher than it should be, but it's up to you if you want to go in. So I don't know if that's how it's meant to come across, but that's what it's kind of leaving it up to whoever wants to go in the water. But the test is saying, yeah, it's too high to go in, but if you want to go in, it's at your peril. Is that what you meant for that?
And we would be happy to follow up and work with the City of Coronado team to do some enhanced education and outreach with your public to share what the different tiers mean. So I'm happy to follow up with you on that.
Okay, well, but I mean, and what I said, is that accurate? I mean, is that, because the warning says, yeah, it's above the limit, but we're not going to restrict you from going into the water. Whereas the other, I mean, the more, the next level is you can't go in the water or you'll get a ticket, right? Or you get a citation or whatever the enforcement is.
That is correct. It leaves it up to the beachgoer to make that determination. So it's providing transparency and providing information on what is in the water and what that water quality is that day. But ultimately, the public wants to make their own decisions, and there's a wide variety of people. You may have somebody who's immunocompromised, and they're going to say, I shouldn't go in this water, but it might be a great surf day. And one of our friends behind me might say, I'm going for that surf. So we want to leave that decision up to the public while giving them all the information they need to make that informed decision.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. And we are just out of time. So let me encourage any member of the public, if you had a question or a comment, feel free to submit it by email and we will try to get you an answer. And I suspect our friends in the South Bay are pretty interested in this topic, and it may be a good topic for follow-up in more detail at a future meeting, because we just sort of touched the surface today. And let's leave it with, are all the presentations that we saw available to the working group and to the public online somehow?
They are. They're all located on the Shoreline Preservation Working Group webpage at sandag.com.
Okay, with that, any closing comments? Yes, Paloma.
Thank you so much, Chair. You did a wonderful job today at moderating the meeting. May I make a suggestion for the next meeting?
Sure,
Perhaps
please.
we can have less presentations so we can allocate a little bit more time for discussion. Would that be possible?
Noted. Sure, that's
Thank you.
possible. We did go from an hour-and-a-half meeting to a 2-hour meeting, hoping we were going to have more time for discussion, but it's some variant of Murphy's Law, right? But we did learn a lot of useful stuff today. Hit the high points on a lot of things, and please follow up with any of the presenters. And again, thank you. We are so fortunate to have the Scripps Institute in our community and all these talented people willing to come down and talk to us. So thanks everybody for coming. And the next meeting is June 1st. And there's some possibility that may be a joint meeting with the Regional Planning Commission. Is that right, Keith?
Yes.
Yeah, if that doesn't happen, it'll be our working group meeting. If it does happen, it will become a joint meeting with the Regional Planning Group. So we are officially adjourned. Thanks everybody for coming.